Victory awaits him, who has everything in order. Luck, we call it. Defeat is definitely due for him, who has neglected to take the necessary precautions. Bad luck, we call it. The Arctic Oceans could be considered as the worst place to be sailing a ship. With large areas of ice which are free to open or close very fast without warning, the Arctic Oceans are some of the least known bodies of water as an outcome of their hostile conditions. Finding a route across these deadly conditions was a great achievement to exploration for over 400 years. This route was known as the Northwest Passage.
People have looked for a Northwest Passage for several centuries with the idea that it would create a shortcut from Europe to the east, or the Orient rather, and it would have eventually cut off a lot of time going around South America.
The Northwest Passage would be significant, connecting Europe and Asia in a way shorter than it has ever been before. Yet, still out of all the hundreds of attempts, one stands out more than the rest. In 1903, an expedition led to search for the Northwest Passage headed towards the Arctic. The leader of this expedition was the mighty Roald Amundsen. Roald Amundsen was a Norwegian explorer of polar regions. He was famous for being the first man to reach the South Pole. Ever since he was a boy, Amundsen dreamed of navigating the Northwest Passage. After his first Antarctic trip in 1889 on the Belgica expedition, Amundsen set his next goal to sail the Northwest Passage. Once he obtained his master's license, he set out to Germany to find George von Neumayer, the leading authority on magnetic research. Neumayer agreed to teach Amundsen the science, and he would make sure that Amundsen had the best scientific equipment for magnetic research for the journey. In 1901, Amundsen headed to Tromsø to purchase the Gjoa. The Gjoa was a small 47-ton ship with a crew of 6 men. Over the next 2 years, he strengthened and equipped the Gjoa to prepare for the expedition. Although you may think that to pass the harsh conditions, a large, strong ship was required, you will see that the small Gjoa ship was perfect for the Northwest Passage. Yet, when he set sail on June 16, 1903, his main objective was not to complete the Northwest Passage. It was to find out if the magnetic North Pole had moved since its discovery in 1831. He made 2 stops on the west coast of Greenland to acquire clothing that the Inuit made for them. On August 22nd, the Gjoa reached Beechey Island, the last safe winter harbor of the Franklin expedition. The Franklin expedition was an expedition led by John Franklin to complete the Northwest Passage, but later disappeared. After Beechey Island, Amundsen sailed down Peel Sound and into Simpson Strait. The strait was free of ice westwards, and although he could have chosen to continue through the Northwest Passage in only one season, he decided to look for a good wintering place where he had already decided to stay for 2 years. He then named a small harbor which he had found Gjoa Haven, which means Gjoa Harbor. This was at a good distance from the magnetic North Pole. Then they began to unload their cargo and establish a new home. Around the end of October, a small group of the Inuit appeared at Gjoa Haven. At the time, the Inuit was not regarded very seriously by the Europeans. Yet, Amundsen quickly made friends with the Inuit, and a good 2-year relationship was started.
For a long time, everybody had the attitude that, what do they know? They've been living there for millennia, and the Europeans thought they knew better, and so they didn't listen.
Amundsen and the other Norwegians learned their language, so they were able to fully communicate with the Inuit. The Inuit taught a lot to the Norwegians, and in exchange, the Norwegians provided the Inuit with tools such as knives, matches, and other tools made of wood and metal, and even food when needed. The Inuit taught them how to make igloos, how to dress warmly in loose furs, and techniques about sledge runners, which benefited Amundsen on the voyage through the Northwest Passage later on.
But there were 2 different kinds of explorers, the ones who wanted to do the ships, and like Franklin, and died. And then you had some who would used the smaller ships and had sleds. And what they expected to do was to be able to move on the sleds with dogs and everything else like the Inuit did. They did not die in the big numbers. So I think the biggest lesson is maybe listening to what the natives who were up there knew what they were doing.
Amundsen and his crew decided to conduct only magnetic and meteorological observations throughout the 2-year stay. Amundsen was greatly disappointed when he never reached the North Pole. This was because the North Pole moved 30 miles north. Yet, this was still a great discovery for Roald Amundsen. He was the first to demonstrate that the magnetic North Pole does not have a permanent location, but moves its position in a fairly regular manner. Furthermore, his carefully organized measurements were the first and only observations of Earth's magnetic field in the northern regions for the next few decades. On August 13, 1905, Amundsen and his crew started the tough navigation of Simpson Strait. As a small, narrow ship, the Gjoa successfully sailed through lots of ice and narrow passages. On the 17th of August, the Gjoa was sailed by Amundsen and his crew through the mysterious unsolved link of the Northwest Passage. The unsolved link was the part that had never been traveled through by a ship. When he saw a whaling ship coming in the opposite direction, he knew that he would complete the Northwest Passage. He had written in his diary, "The Northwest Passage was done. My boyhood dream." At that moment, it was accomplished. A strange feeling welled up in my throat. I was somewhat overstrained and worn. It was weakness in me, but I felt tears in my eyes. The only successful paths that didn't end tragically took decades for explorers to navigate. Although we often celebrate the triumph of certain explorers, such as Roald Amundsen for navigating a route through the hazardous and dangerous Northwest Passage waters, many of the attempts that ended as tragedies equally deserve of their place in polar exploration history. In 1524, Estevão Gomes sailed from Florida to Cape Race, but when they never found a western passage, the 11-month journey came to an end after returning to Spain. Although it was a failed mission, it actually resulted in maps depicting a coastline stretching from Florida to Newfoundland. Martin Frobisher tried to complete the Northwest Passage a few times, but never succeeded. In doing so, he found a coast now known as Labrador, Canada. Then, they sailed to Baffin Island, rather than north, where natives tragically captured several crew members. In spite of this, they came back with a stone, believed to be gold, which provided enough funding for 2 more expeditions, which still failed. Danish sailor Jens Munk was sent in 1619 to find the Northwest Passage to India, after failing twice already. Mistaking it for Hudson Strait, he found his way to Frobisher, after ending up in incorrect locations. Monk decided to sail south and found the Hudson Strait. He renamed it to Freedom Christian. However, by 1620, 61 members of his crew died from cold weather, leaving only Monk and 2 others to return to Europe. There are countless other attempts at finding an easy and fast passageway through the 18th century. James Cook's attempts in 1778 began at Nootka Sound, while John Ross's attempt in 1818 navigated the most extremely hazardous and dangerous situation, some even resulting in death. In 1850, Robert McClure and his crew traveled west by east by ship and by sledge, right before being trapped in ice for 3 winters straight. The reason for Amundsen's success in completing the Northwest Passage is that he believed that preparation leads to success. He took 2 years to equip and strengthen the Gjoa so that it would fit for the expedition. He spoke to people and asked for their help and received their help. He got good advice for scientific equipment and learned many tricks from the Inuit. He had believed that he could do it. What was thought the hardest route was actually the easiest, and the easiest route was actually the hardest. Yet, Amundsen didn't care. He believed that he could take the perceived hardest route and ended up in success.